Today we're doing diaries. For those of you joining us, because I know we had some from the county, I am with QRSE. My name is Kainani Kraut.
Hi, I'm Alan. I'm also one of the instructors with QRSE. Thank you for all joining us today.
Blaine with Highway CC, who is our contract manager, is on. Anything from Highway CC before we get started?
No, hello. Thank you for joining in. Hope you guys learned something. If you guys got questions, even after the class, let us know. Either somebody from Cursium, somebody from my staff. Thank you.
We will post some info on the wiki site that has some previous classes. So if you missed some, you can go there. You can always reach out to Highway CC or your counterpart at the district. And we're kind of talking about how we'll roll out these expectations. It really goes back to the basics. The procedures that were written 50 years ago are very good. So we're going to spotlight those, but we are going to refresh them because with DOT, there is a new instruction, well, not new, quasi-new, to utilize e-construction, which is simple terms, paperless contract administration, and you're really using technology and the tools with the Federal Highway Administration under everyday counts. So there is a lot of change going on, but the basics of the content, it really goes back to what's in the procedures currently. But we'll refresh that and give it a new spin with e-construction because we're not doing paper binders anymore and things like that that are kind of sprinkled in there, and we'll be combining everything. So we're going to talk about diaries. We're going to talk about why we need diaries, being a key part of the team, justifying payment, documenting those eyewitness accounts. And then what is in a diary, that's where we'll use a lot of polling. And then at the very end, we're going to talk about who reads the diaries. Again, the current DOT procedures, if you are doing federal highway projects, are the procedures that we should be following. And there's a lot of information in there, and we'll talk about, you know, your audience as you're writing these diaries. Now, this is the first of two classes. This is talking about that expectation on the content of diaries. We do have a follow-up that I think we're working towards putting in the e-construction system. So for those of you maybe at the county level that haven't been exposed to it, you'll start getting that exposure. And I'm assuming through the e-construction rollout with the Federal Highway Administration, there'll be more information on how the counties are kind of implementing this whole, you know, everyday counts initiative. So lots of new stuff, lots of change. I think a year or so ago when we talked about proactive project management, we also kind of talked about change, and it's coming. Why do we have diaries? So the first part, we're going to talk about the why. Field, and the field is not just inspection. Survey, I saw some surveys, some of my favorite surveyors are on. It is me. You know, when we have project engineers, construction manager, anybody that's in the field becomes a key part of what's going on in the field. We're going to talk about what right now is in the procedures to justify payment and the expectation on that, and then just overall eyewitness accounts. Because without that documentation, in my mind, it's always, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And so we need to provide that documentation as a project record. And like I said, there's a lot of good stuff in the existing procedures that we're going to refresh and talk about. So this is just a reminder, when we talked about teamwork from our proactive project management, the triangle, right? Everybody has a piece of this puzzle. We've got our eyes and ears, inspectors, surveyors, but again, anybody that's in the field. If I go in the field to witness, I should be creating a diary. I think some of those best practices we've gotten away from, we're going back. Project engineer, that's the all-knowing person that's kind of orchestrating the project. Again, if they're in the field, we should be doing a diary. And then we have our resident engineer, construction engineer. And if they're going out for, maybe they're settling a dispute on some kind of quality issue, or observing a concrete pour that happens to be part of a pilot project or new concrete that's being rolled out or something, they should be doing a short diary as well. And ownership. So again, besides being an integral part of that team, this is our community. So we're going to talk about those core values that the Highway Division has for the division in general. But these projects are part of our community. So we're building our community. We not only are part of that field presence, but this is not only our job, it's our responsibility and it's our community. So we want to take ownership of that portion of the project. And then it's inspection. So inspection is not just observing, but there's a lot of study that goes into that. We have to make sure we have our submittals, shop drawings. We understand the spec requirements. We understand the drawings. There is a lot of background that goes into that. And it's not that again, it's a team effort. So if the field guys who happen to be there, again, could be the project engineer, inspectors, whoever, don't quite get the requirements, then make sure as a team we're talking about that. So we're going to talk a little bit about inspection versus observation. And then this is my little example. In a worst case scenario, right? The younger guys don't even know what this is. I kind of like this scene just because it's.
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question.
I'll answer the question.
You want answers?
I
think I'm entitled. You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth. Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You weep for Santiago and you curse the Marine.
Anyway, do you guys remember that? Who is online that has never seen that? The point of that little clip is that in a worst case scenario, are you ready to defend your diary? It's not so much about who called the code red and all that, but being ready to defend your diary and having that much detail and keeping in mind that in a worst case scenario, it could be 5 or 10 years later. Like, do you have enough information in your diary to defend against Tom Cruise? So yes, a few good men. That's right, Daniel. My question is, who has never seen that? Because Maliko has never seen that. And I was like, what? How have you not seen that?
Marines. You have that luxury.
Uh-oh. We're on to the next one. So documentation, it's part of our job. So we're in the why we need the diaries, right? So we want to make sure we're ready to defend our diaries. It's part of our job. It's part of our community. You know, we want to take ownership of that. And basically, it's a little love letter to our future selves about what happened, right? So we understand, simply explained. We know that we provided the quality, and we could be on the stand defending what we have written in our diaries. So again, it's documentation, so important, and it's everybody's responsibility. Okay, so now we're going to get into the procedures a little bit, because there are several procedures that sprinkle this responsibility in there, right? I've been mentioning it's everybody's responsibility. So Highway CC will go through a consolidation of the procedures and write it, and we'll sprinkle in e-construction as appropriate so that we have something that's a little more on par with what we're doing nowadays. But the project diaries are kept and documented. That's part of the engineer's responsibility. Inspectors being familiar with the plans and specs and preparing their daily diary in accordance with 10.03.05. And so in 10.02.01, it's everybody's responsibility to keep this documentation. So again, we're bringing everybody back to the basics, what is already in the procedures, and there's really good stuff in there. So let's just get back to that expectation. And remember, when we're talking about our core values, right? Accountability. So we want to verify, we want to measure, we want to document. Safety, we're going to talk a little bit about those annotations in our diaries. If we see something, we want to say something. Community, again, not only is it our job, it's part of our community. It's part of what we provide as a public service. And then innovation, being fair and reasonable, but we're bringing in that e-construction. So it'll be a lot of change for people to get used to. And, you know, just a side note, if you need equipment, I know there were some of our other diary classes, they were saying, we don't have this, we don't have that. I know there's a big effort right now to really roll out e-construction. So if you're having any issues, Alex and Highway O are taking the lead on that. But in order to make sure it's implementatable, make sure that you've provided any feedback if you're missing equipment. I know some of the other classes were saying, we don't have this, we don't have that. And then, of
So-
course, teamwork.
So for
It's
the
shared
innovation, the
responsibility.
fair and reasonable mindset thing, that's so that you keep an open mind, yeah, to other possibilities that might be things we've never thought about. Yeah. So, but if you have that mindset, then it means your mind is open to these potential innovations that could be implemented.
And as I just mentioned, teamwork, it's all of our responsibility. Not only are the field guys writing it, but the engineers are reviewing it. It basically is our project record. And so if we need it to defend against Tom Cruise, we need it to defend against Tom Cruise. And we just need to make sure as a team that it actually reflects what's happening on the project. And again, we just listed out the core values of the highway divisions to maximize available resources and provide safe, efficient, accessible, and sustainable highway system. So again, with that, I know everybody's a little bit hesitant. We've talked a little bit about e-construction and other classes, and there's confusion. How is this rolling out? When do we have to do it? All those kind of things. There'll be more to come. Alex, like I said, Highway O taking the lead on that. Under innovation, to me, the idea is that makes our job easier. We're not pushing paper, but it will be this kind of curve that we have to overcome to really understand how it integrates and uses. And there's several platforms that people will be tasked to learn, and again, making sure people have the equipment and everything to make the program work. But I think the administration is very, it's a high priority for them to make sure this thing works. So here are all of the current procedures that have to do with diaries. And we will get in probably in the next class more into the measurement and payment and really talking about, how that happens in the e-construction system. I'd rather do it in the e-construction system than, how we're doing it now. So again, we'll probably be doing that. But there are a lot of existing procedures that talk about all of these diaries and what should be in the diary and how it's annotated. So this is a slide that has our wiki site on it, the DOT highways. And then this is the current
Maleko just posted the link in the chat.
And so on there under resources, there's a procedure manual that has these procedures posted. So those are the current procedures. Under resources, I believe, see to the very right of there, it has the training material too. So I've been skirting around this e-construction. So you can see at the end of December, it was direction to make sure all new projects, it almost implies that if it hasn't started, that you're going to do a change order, but those projects that are currently in construction, I think are exempt. So I think we were going to try to get a little more clarification on that. Art might know, but basically this is for DOT highways. So the next question would be, okay, because this came up, I think Big Island counties were like, well, when are we doing that? And those are questions we need to get answered. I know they're meeting fairly frequently on this, so we'll work to get those answers, but it's coming basically. Paperless system, your diaries in there, the diaries go to payment, the payment or the materials module flows through the lab, all these things go together. There's a platform for as-built. And so the as-built information and red lines will be in there, using that with the contractor. So all of these right here, it says the 3 integrated platforms will be used on projects. So again, that's coming. So here's your warm-up question. What e-construction software is mandated by the administrator? No, Lotus is not correct, but that's an interesting
Wow, that's
answer. Now, again, Maliko, do you even know what Lotus is? So we've got FACTS, that's correct. FACTS, HeadLight, PlanGrid. That is the right answer. All 3 in one platform. So again, it's coming. Some of you, I think some of the neighbor islands might have been exposed to HeadLight. I don't know how many people have seen FACTS, but yes, that is the answer. So if you haven't gotten into Poll Everywhere, I believe the mandate was to use an e-construction platform. Right, an e-construction platform was a mandate, I believe, last year. So now the mandate is you're going to use a platform, and it consists of HeadLight, FACTS, and PlanGrid. So I believe that is the current direction. But if you have questions on that, let us know, because I think everybody's kind of trying to figure out what the direction is right now. So for the county guys, if you haven't gotten that direction, again, I don't know what the direction is for counties just yet. So the next question, and we haven't gotten into it, it's almost like a warm-up question. So justifying payment. So it's two main reasons for diaries, right? Justifying payment requests from the contractor, 2. So you got to get 2 choices. Providing times, durations of delays, witness important activities in the field, ready to be on the stand, grilled by Tom Cruise, or adding contract compliance statements to the diary. So 2 main reasons. So again, we're kind of warming up our poll everywhere. Okay, justifying payment looks to be one of the winners, and witnessing important activities in the field. That is right. Those are the 2 main ones, at least 2 main ones we're talking about today. There are a lot of important activities, but we're really going to talk about justifying payment and witnessing those important activities. So of course, providing time and durations, that's an important activity, but it falls under the witness all important activities. Kind of disappointed no one's, okay, thank you. I was like, we need some Tom Cruise grilling ones. The payment procedure under 10.03.05. So this is our procedure, current procedure existing right now, 10.03.05. And then we've kind of split it up into the important parts that we're going to talk about today. But the 3 things under payment that I really want you to focus on or remember is recording all field measurements and references to the appropriate sheet where measurements can be found. And so if you're taking a measurement, it's so many linear feet of guardrail, sheet, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So referencing those field measurements. The next one will be a completed work statement. So when it's completed, it's checked, found, and conformance with plans and specs, or sheet number, blah, 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 or specification, blah, 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 or shop drawing, blah, 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 that is in on page, blah, blah, blah. So having that compliance statement. And then the last one, again, as applicable, that the field samples have been taken. Pending over here, payment pending results, what are the requirements that can be recorded on that same day? So maybe if we don't have results, you have to do a cylinder, the cylinder hasn't been broken, you at least talk about the samples that were taken. And so that's kind of our payment justification, those 3 things, right? So again, these are in the procedures, and we'll do a cleanup of the procedures and combine it. So we're back to poll everywhere. So how can documentation justify payment? Yes, measurements, sampling. Yes, record measurements. So really that measurements, and we haven't quite worked with Highway O yet to understand how those measurements get into your progress payment. I know some projects are doing it already. And so when we do the diary writing module, we'll get into more of that so that there is a correct, I don't know, I know in our field measurement procedure, there's number of digits that you should have for certain measurements. And so I don't know if e-construction is that sensitive. So when we do the revamp of the procedures, that's part of what we need to kind of talk about more. Measurements. So measurements is one. Remember the compliance statement. So that statement that says everything that's been done in conformance with plans and specs that has been completed and verified in conformance. And then the other one would be just, again, as applicable, that there were samples taken to verify whatever. Yes. Okay. So again, we're getting warmed up with some of this. So this is an example of a diary, documents work completed per plans and specs. So where does it say that? What does it say in this little section? There are 2 statements that show that work is complete and with what sheets. So just to give you examples, right? So contractor completed rebar installation for concrete barrier wall at existing sign in listed stationing. So the stationing on the right. Tie epoxy coated number 5, da, 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 per plan sheet numbers S41, S42. So that's one statement. Maybe this last one. So last section installed per plan with at a 6:1 slope ratio. So that's just examples of how those things are referencing plan sheets, talking about completion or partial completion. Now, Alan has her kind of C-type personality detailed comment she'd like to share.
So in this statement where it talks about, so this whole description talks about the work and how it's being put in place. And in this one sentence, it talks about certain things being added at joints. So this word added, I would just caution people about, because then it's like, okay, was it truly added? Are we talking about a change order? Or if that person who wrote this could say, you know, this was just the next thing that was then done. And so this was added after that thing per plans sheet number, whatever. Then
so you
that
might
would answer
use
that
the word
question.
installed. So
Yeah,
1.5 inch epoxy coated smooth dowels installed at construction joints. So it was just a caution, like I would have never picked up on that, but it's those things that if you're not familiar with the work, you see added, you know, somebody might construe that as it's additional work versus installed. So those are the kind of things that you might want to keep in mind.
Yeah, and if it truly was added as, you know, a necessity, then you may want to highlight that in your comments, maybe in the additional remarks area that, you know, this was found to be necessary, consulted with the engineer and designer, or whatever coordinations might have occurred is what you might want to record here and show that these things were done that day.
Here's some other examples. Documents, work measurements, locations. Again, this is all about justifying payment. So we've got our station, and then we have the amount of cold plain areas. Then you have a total excavated area. And then under the reinforced pipe, it tells us what the linear foot is, how much, the station. I liked this other 206, right? It actually says this work was incidental. So that's a good annotation. So having those kind of examples in your diary just help. Again, we're looking for, in this particular case, justifying payment and looking for those measurements. Picking nits. Yes, Jason. That's why I said it might be more of a C personality thing, but good point. You know, it's not that hard to say added versus installed. So those are the kind of things. Okay, so not only the two main things we wanted to really focus on today was the justifying payment with the measure, the compliance statement, and then any samples taken. And then this is the other part. Again, just a reminder from our previous class, we've got our eyes and ears in the field, and now we have that eyewitness account. But again, it's in the middle, right? Because anybody can provide those eyewitness accounts. Just on Kapolei, I can think that, you know, Willie was out there, I was out there. We were talking in the first pour, like how they were pouring it. I never did a diary. This is a good refresher for me that we should go in there and talk about what we witnessed, because there were some quality issues that we were seeing as we were out there. And then we were talking to the contractor about adjustments they should make. There was the pour itself had to be, it was kind of interesting, but it was at this 45-degree angle askew on a bridge structure. And so during the pour, the contractor wasn't doing everything in accordance with their work plan. And so those are the things that we should be immediately implementing into, you know, our diaries. So
there's
anything
a
else on
question
this?
in the chat
Yes.
from Teddy. If diary is detailed, do you need to make entries in the measurement book?
The answer, I don't know yet. So let's just say we're understanding when we do the COCOA reviews that we probably need to be a little more detailed. We don't believe it'll be in the procedures, but it may be through the construction committee on what expectations are. Right now, we're saying in the diaries, because not everybody is using the measurement book like they used to. But when e-construction comes and when full rollout of diaries on projects you're working on, so again, I think through this process, we've said there's before e-construction and then during e-construction. E-construction, everything will be in your diaries. All your measurements, everything will be in your diaries. There is no measurement book. Before e-construction, I don't know yet. I think that's the clarification we need to make with the construction committee throughout the districts, how they're doing it. They may just say, you know, continue doing work as you're normally used to doing it. So if you're used to doing those measurements in your measurement book, that may be. I know Oahu has been using their CPMS system, and I don't know if every project is rolling everything out. So that's the hard part. But I will say e-construction, everything is in your work diary. Everything's your work report. Sorry, that's what they call it. All measurements, everything. So like I said, there's a little bit of change coming and the program is getting worked out as we move forward. Okay, so back to our procedures. So again, we talked about the payment, showed a couple examples. We'll go a little more into it during our next section, but these are the other things. So 2 main reasons for diary, justifying payment, and then talking about all of those important activities. So pulling from our existing procedures 10, 03, 05, we have our entries and remarks. I think we're still working out what these things will be called in HeadLight or in the e-construction system, but this is what should be annotated. So previously it was called remarks. So your work rejected, reasons it was rejected, if there are shutdowns or delays, when it shut down, when work resumed, any explanations for those things, account of any time spent by the contractor or men and equipment on disputed items, whether that's force account or non-participating work. All of these eyewitness accounts could potentially go into disputes, changes, or claims. Then we go even more, right? Length and cause of the delays, verbal instructions, the date, specific people to whom instructions were given, and the instructions, what were those instructions? So again, if engineers are out there and they are changing, I'll go back to my Kapolei example. In one pour, we did it, they made adjustments. The next pour, somebody out there told them, don't follow your work report or your work plan previously submitted. All of those instructions should be in a diary. Because if something comes back and something happens, the contractor is going to say, I was directed not to follow my work plan, and who and when and why. So discussions, because I think in that particular case, they were worried about the concrete setting up and having a joint where it shouldn't have been, things like that. But it's important to provide all that background. And again, you know, even now, I think a year, not even a year later, it would be hard for me to remember everything that happened. Discussions with the contractor, if there are supervisors, officials, any utilities, you want to have all those annotated. Verbal orders received or reports given or made. Again, all of this feeds into eyewitness accounts. Oh my gosh, there's more. Work performed by the contractor without inspection. So if they performed work, you found out they worked on Saturday, in your Monday diary, you would say, hey, all this was done, no inspection for XYZ, and try to at least annotate, I just found out all this happened over the weekend. Work not performed in accordance with plan, whatever corrective actions might be, communications received, complaints, you know, all of those things. The chat seems to be blowing up a little bit. So again, all of these are part of disputes.
So yeah, there's a couple
inspectors
questions.
Responsible for payment measurements. Yes, Delton. So there was a discussion about this because the engineers will do a lot of that estimation based on their review. In e-construction, it comes from the diaries. And so making sure, and especially now, might be a little different with lump sum, but now everything's migrating back to unit price. And so we'll have to work as a team with your project engineers. Again, there's decimal place measurements that may or may not be required. So in our next diary writing class, we'll talk about what all that is. And again, we're working with Highway O with Alex to actually roll it out in the platform itself. So that hopefully will give you more information on what it looks like. Is this program going to have formatted sheets for us to use like spreadsheet format? Intended to fill it out with the device in the field.
The idea is that we won't have a checklist necessarily for every one of these things, because then you'd be just scrolling past some of these if they don't occur every day, right? But the idea is that using the content of these procedures, we just want you to know that these are the kind of things that need to be recorded. So in our diary writing class, then we'll go over some of the kind of statements you can use to capture that kind of information. But it will be on you to recognize, oh, I'm having a conversation with these people. I should write these things down.
Elton's question. Yeah, so again.
I mean, as a team, you guys might work out who's going to do what checking. But like we said earlier, everyone can and should be doing a diary when they're on site and doing any kind of work for the project to document what they did and what they said. And sometimes it's the engineer that can write down what they said and did more clearly, because that's their own account of what they did, right? Versus an inspector saying what they saw the engineer do. So it would be much better information if the engineer wrote down what they did themselves. So
yeah, so that's kind of how it's supposed to work. The measurement, in some kind of tablet. Again, I think those are the details being worked out, because I'm not familiar wholly with the system. Very excited to be using it on one of the projects that we'll be starting. You might be able to do it from your phone. So the equipment needs is kind of, I don't know. And then personally, like I usually always have my laptop with my phone as my hotspot. And so I would want to enter it in on my laptop while I was in the field. Honestly, if I don't do it, I probably won't do it at all. So I think some of these habits are going to be developed, and we'll kind of again, when we do the diary entering one, we'll talk a little bit about, we wanted to have some canned statements that you could use in your diaries. I recognize that we have a span of experience on the line and throughout the state. And again, we're not just talking about DOT highways. We're talking about consultants. We're talking about counties. And honestly, we've been talking to DAGs and harbors and other divisions. So this class and training is meant for everyone as a good refresher. So great if you guys are doing these things already. If you're not, the platform is coming, and I think your business will change, your habits will change a little bit more. Even if it's just that you're not writing it, you are going to start putting it in some kind of device. And so recognizing everybody's going to change something, habits are going to change. Even if you are putting all this content, measurements, statements in your diaries, just the point that you're not putting it in a measurement book anymore, you're going to put all of it in e-construction, will be a change in and of itself. This is one last reminder. We had a dispute resolution class. Again, on the wiki site, we have all of these classes. But one of the things I want to point out, and this was a discussion, and I know not everybody was on that class, but you can go to the wiki site and see it if you want to just kind of refresh on everything. But within the claims specification under 107, there is a statement saying a claim cannot be an amount greater than the contractor would be entitled to under the terms and conditions limitations set forth in the force account provision. So really, when we start talking about all this, and we'll talk a little bit more when we get into our next section, that we need to be able to have enough information to recreate a force account scenario. And so it's, again, going to be a little bit of a change for you guys. And when we have done our reviews with Highway CC on diaries, everybody's doing it a little bit different. So I think e-construction is going to be provide uniformity. There'll be that kind of uniformity. And then hopefully the content, like we're saying, people are already doing it, great, but there's going to be a change in how it's just being inputted, because we already know not everybody is doing it the same. So Teddy is saying, are these plan changes accepted by Federal Highway? When they audit our books, will they be satisfied? Yes, they will. So all of this is being vetted through the Federal Highway Administration at a higher level. I believe they are meeting on a weekly basis on all of this. And then through Highway C, the construction program, we provided a briefing to them on the training program in general, which is, setting some of these expectations. And they were totally on board with everything. So we also meet with Kaha'a through construction program after we have our construction committee meeting, which is actually this week. So once a month, we're providing updates on what's going on with the construction program. But ideally, at some point in the future, there'll be a dashboard they can log into, and every audit or review or oversight will just happen in the e-construction platform. So that's why I think having very clear expectations of what is in there and how it's annotated will be important. And what I think we are doing right now is we're doing that through the wiki site. There's an interpretation tabs there. There are examples from Highway O on their change orders. So, and then the training class is there. The procedures are there. When new procedures are rolled out, it's there. Wherever that one-stop shop lies for construction contract administration, you guys will all have access to it. And right now it's all there. Even Federal Highway over the weekend, kind of surprised, they were trying to log in, and we had this maintenance thing we were doing. So they are logging in, and we are doing everything in concert with Federal Highways. Why do we have diaries? Not only is it our job, it's part of our community. Again, we're public servants. We want to make sure that what we're building out there is serving the community, the greater good. And the two big things that we're doing this for is that payment, to document the payment, and to make sure we have those eyewitness accounts. And I think the difficult part with eyewitness accounts is you never know what's important until you know it's important. And then you go back to your diaries. One of these changes that I was doing probably within the last 3 or 4 months was a change on guardrail. And so I wanted to go back and look at what production we had on guardrail. And what was hard is there was other work blended into the guardrail work. And so in the next section, we're going to talk about how that information is going to be annotated in the new e-construction system. So it's hard if they're doing grading, and if we're doing shoulder prep, and they were doing pavement base prep work, if all of those items are embedded into the work that accomplished that day, it's really hard for me to take the information and extrapolate it for a change. And so the e-construction system and the next section that we're going to talk about after your short break talks about what it's going to look like in the e-construction. And again, the next class, which hopefully in a month and a half, maybe, we can talk about what that is actually going to look like in the system and give you previews of that. And then Keith and Alex will lead that effort. We can support and kind of start showing you what this looks like. So as your projects are coming online, like I said, I believe all of the ones that are starting right now, you're going to be using this. You can start to get a better idea of what it looks like. But it's happening. It's happening. It's moving forward. It's all coming. So that the payment and measurement procedure has decimal places required, and that's the part I don't know if it's going to be required. That's what we're going to have to work out for the next module with Keith and Alex.
So you did release them for break, right?
I did. I said 9:07.
Okay.
I'm just talking to
Okay.
fill in the quiet time. It's like,
Okay.
what is that called? I don't know.
And yes, we have other projects generating the estimate through Econ.
So
not just Leeward.
But it's also, they're taking it from the diaries, right? So where Delton is saying, so the inspectors are going to be responsible for measurement. That's, I mean, the big thing is that in their diaries, they're going to have the measurement. Somehow the measurement is read and goes into your estimate, your progress payment estimate. And then somehow the engineer is going to check or confirm.
The engineer vets the diaries, right? They approve, right? The engineers approve. So that's the approval of the measurement where they can make adjustments and stuff, right?
Right.
That's the process.
Yeah.
And the engineers review where they can make changes. And then it gets, it's the whole e-construction is no double entry, right? So if a measurement is entered in the diary, no double entry.
Right.
I mean, it can be adjusted, it can be amended, whatever, vetted when the engineers review it, but then it gets posted to the estimate. That's the way it's supposed to work, right? The no double entry is a big point.
Yeah. I think, and you guys are working towards that for everything, so that you're not, even you have your pipeline spreadsheet, or I don't know what other issues, and the PSS and statuses, that everything is in your e-construction system, and you don't have to go enter here, and you don't have to go do this. So
yeah, it all gets pulled and shared on the different platforms.
Yeah.
Right. That's the FaxWare. FaxWare is the diary writing platform. So everything in FaxWare has to be able to be pulled into Fax to generate all our reports and everything. And then that gets pulled into the PSS, and then Socrata will pull from the PSS. But no double entry.
Double entry.
That's the gist of this e-construction. No double entry.
No double entry. Got it, Delton? No double entry. No double work. And so that's where it may feel like work now, but ideally it minimizes or reduces overall work in the future.
And just through the vetting process of the diaries being approved by the project engineer, then the resident engineer should handle the measurements as approval, acknowledgement, approval, concurrence, whatever term you want to use.
Okay, so now that we had a break and we had all this discussion, we're back to polls. So Maliko's going to pull up the poll. Again, we're getting you remembered after break and re-warmed up with poll everywhere. So why is your job to create diaries? And we're going to roll into the next section. So make sure you are polling. Maliko's got it. Okay, make sure the implementation is done correctly. DOT core value, yes. Woohoo! Ask it. Oh, yes, eyes and ears. Payment, eyewitness account. It's part of our job. It's part of our community. Excellent. All of those answers. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Oh my gosh, I love that person. Confirming billing. All of those answers. Thank you. So we're going back. We're going into our next section. So this is what's in the diary. So we talked about why we're having a diary. We did talk about the overall purpose of what we're doing. And now we're going to go through a lot of these examples. So this goes back to Delton's, like everybody has different personality. We're going to document differently, and that's fine. I think your main thing, you're working with your team, your resident engineer / project engineer / construction engineer on the expectations. As a state, we're continuing to talk about what that looks like. On the wiki site, we'll have examples so that you can refer to those examples. And as a group, as a team, as a division, we're moving forward and getting better. We're going to talk about a little bit inspection versus observation. And then we have all these activities. We're going to talk about the payment again, because we're just going to hammer that in. We have lots of polling. Safety, delay, weather, differing site, what days to write a diary, manpower, equipment, visitors, materials, and very end photos that tell us a 1,000-word story of what happened. Okay, so back to our procedures. This is where it kind of talks about all important activities. Okay, so can we include a laptop as part of the pay item on a project? Maybe incorporate field office. So that's a possibility. I think working with, got to work with the county, or sorry, whoever your counterparts are. I think part of might be equipment purchase. So maybe procurement issues, but I'm sure that if you're renting it or it's part of a pay item, there's a way to do it. So I would have a separate conversation on that. I don't think that is the way DOT Highways Division is doing it. I think they're doing purchases, but I also think, and let me know if I'm wrong, that as they were starting the pilot, they were either renting iPads from the CM or from the contractor for the projects. So I think it goes back to, when the programs will be required for the counties, and you may be going through a similar rollout that DOT Highways did. Again, Art just mentioned it's been mandate for the past year, and so it's just getting more and more ramped up. But I know they've been working on this for a couple years, and on the Kapolei project, I believe they were kind of renting iPads from the CM on that. So
yeah, and for the state, for Oahu or the state, we're working on putting in a new spec sections for contractor furnished, because part of this construction platform, for us to truly use the scope of what we're trying to implement, we need the contractors to use it, so that submittals and everything is all paperless, right? So we need the contractors to buy in, and we're putting line items where they provide whatever devices we need, and they pay the licensing fee, for the construction platform. So that's how we're going to handle it in the future. It's just not in our specs yet. It'll be in probably the contracts coming out maybe the end of the second quarter, but that's how we're kind of handling it right now.
Okay.
So it's doable. It's doable.
Yeah.
And Dalton, can that be vehicles? Yes. Your REs know that they can get contractor furnished vehicles.
So anyway, lots of these things. Work with your construction engineer for the various districts. You can work with your construction engineer as well. Districts have oversight of the counties, so those would probably be your main people to work with them and federal highways on what's happening. And like I said, there might be an overall approach to all this. I feel like it's, besides what Art's saying, they're working at higher levels with federal highways on stuff. So seems to be changing weekly. Let's just say that. Okay, so here we are again, back to our procedure. The diary, it talks about written daily by personnel inspecting the contract. That becomes a daily team communication, like Art said, that the REs are reading that. The REs, project engineers, maybe it's consultant staff, they're reading those diaries and they're accepting it. That's how everything's going to kind of go together. In our existing procedure, some of this is going to be covered by e-construction, right? We no longer have those loose leaf folders. We're not filing them chronologically because it'll all be in the platform. Everything will be neat and legible. So these are some of the updates that need to take place. I do want to point out that factual information. And so that'll be part of our diary writing, that we don't want to add our opinions. We want to make sure we're writing it factually. So what does that look like versus opinions? Like I said, we're all just moving forward in the platform, but getting better at our writing, various levels of expertise. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I already do this. You might, but it's going to be in a new place. But there are those that don't do it. So we just want to standardize, make sure everybody's consistent on the expectations. So diaries are submitted to the engineer for filing. Again, that's going to be in the econ system. And then there are requirements for the project diary to incorporate the resident engineer and project engineer diaries. Then we have the survey diaries. And I think, again, when you're in the field, it becomes part of that. What did I do in the field? What was part of the communication that might have occurred with the contractor, if that's the case? So we'll talk about that. And the concept, especially in e-construction, everybody's just putting their work report. If you went into the field, you document that. What happened? What did you look at? Were you out there? I was last week driving smoothness and concrete and trying to figure out, is the pavement smooth or not? And da-da-da. So all of those things should be annotated in a diary. We have the different procedures. Again, this will be part of the revision. Everything's going to be thrown in, well, maybe not thrown in together, but we will simplify it, put it in a more updated fashion with respect to how you guys are operating right now. Just want to point out that there are a lot of, like I said, good content in your existing procedures that talk about when you're doing your diaries, all personnel who are assigned to the project, that applies to everybody, all days that the inspector is assigned to the project. So we're going to talk about that every day, working days, non-working days. There might be multiple projects that you're focusing on. So again, it's diaries for all of those, and it'll be in e-construction. So just a quick note on inspection versus observation. So inspection, in a more formal definition, is most generally an organized examination or formal evaluation exercise. In engineering or construction, it involves measurements, tests, gauges applied to certain characteristics with regard to an object or activity. So really, that's inspection. We think of observation more in taking notice from afar. If we're observing, we may not be taking those measurements. We may not be talking about compliance. We may not be, getting into the granular of it's in compliance with sheet number, blah, blah, blah. So we are really, our role on that project, focusing on quality and quantity and not taking that from afar, but really in a proactive manner. And like I said, it's not only the drawings, it's not only the specs, but you might have shop drawings, you might have submittals that all have to be looked at. Oh my gosh, there was an RFI that changed this. So it does become a complex activity incorporating all of these different documents. So field measurement book. So somebody had brought that up. This is, again, something that'll be incorporated into your work reports. But all of these measurement items, and like Art said, there's significant figures that go with the measurement items. So we'll talk about what those are. But again, existing procedure talks about some of these measurements. Then we're going to go back to this procedure where we talk about payment, recording field measurements and references, recording that completion statement and compliance in accordance with plans and specs, especially at the end, and then making sure we've annotated if samples were taken. So let's go into some exercises. So here we are with polling. So here is an example. What is a statement in the above description that justifies payment? So we have the contractor truck arrived on site. 10:15, concrete was placed. 11:15, sample was taken. So which might be the statement that justifies payment after everything we've talked about? So sample taken, right? So we have been talking about all of these statements that justify payments. So one justifying payment is measurement, right? The second one is some kind of statement that was done in compliance with plans and specs. And then the last one talks about any samples that were taken. So those are kind of the three things we want you to focus on when you are justifying payment. So poll everywhere question, what is missing? So what is missing? The sample recordation of the sample taken, results of compaction or location of the sample. So go ahead and read this entry and what is missing. So we were talking about payment, right? So one thing for payment is measurements, results of the test. And so actually this is a little bit of a trick question because we want to know, we said we wanted to know when the samples were taken, but also knowing if you did a compaction test, you should have those results right then. And so I think that's the answer, results of compaction test. So that's just quickly, if you have completed the sand cone, then you can say where the location was, what the results were, and if it passed or not, basically. I mean, you would hope that people know that it has to be 95% or whatever, but maybe there's a different requirement. So if you know it passed or not, then that would be additional good information to have. What is missing? So contractor completed the conduit connections at existing electrical substation. So that's the location. So what's missing? Quantity for completion. A statement that says conformance with plans and specs and the sheet number or the location. Which one is missing? Ooh, everybody's all over the place. Which again is correct. So there is no quantity here, and we kind of don't know whether it's needed or not. We don't know what those final connections are. Maybe it was just the connection. On what it actually took, again, it might be a lump sum item. And so you may be able to go back to the schedule of values to say what that final connection is. Maybe it's all part of the, so this particular is about the 2-inch PVC piping. So it's a lump sum. You have the final connection. We don't see a comment that says this has been completed in conformance with sheet number, blah, 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 spec number, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't even say this has been in conformance with plans and specs. So at completion, we would want to have that statement. That this statement alludes to the fact that it's completed. So quantities may or may not be applicable. We don't know. It doesn't tell us. We don't have enough information. And then the location, it says existing electrical substation. I'm assuming there's only one, but again, it might be having a little more detail would be helpful. If I were to come into this project and there was, say somebody got electrocuted or I don't know, and I'm coming in as an outsider, I don't know what's going on from this statement or from these statements. So definitely, if they're saying completed, that indicates that it was completed in conformance with plans and specs, but you might have quantities that are applicable. We don't know. And the location may or may not need more detail. We don't know. And so just, again, some of these examples just to show you from an outsider looking in. I think that's why hopefully the engineers are looking at it from that perspective, that they're seeing, okay, is this clear enough? If I had to go on the stand with Tom Cruise, would I be able to defend this? That's the detail we're looking for. And as Delton said, everybody has a different personality. And so you have to kind of look at it from that perspective. And when you're in the project, it's really hard because you are like, oh, I know exactly what they're talking about. But will you know what they're talking about in 5 to 10 years? So this is the next one. Go ahead and read it. What is missing? So there's concrete that arises at a site. We're doing concrete paving, cast in place. What is missing? So do we have equipment use, statement affirming compliance with plans and specs, and the quantity of concrete that was placed? So which one is missing? Okay, we've got 10 at one time. I was super excited about having 23 people answer. So now we're about halfway there. So quantity of placed concrete, statement affirming compliance with plans and specs. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. This might be a little bit tricky, but again, it goes back to, where you are. It's hard to tell when you're kind of taking snapshots of this. So it's all part of a learning experience, but in ours, we had whited out the quantity. So it really was the quantity, but because we want to make sure we have that statement when the work is completed. So it's hard to say, how much of this work was completed. It'd go back to your project engineer. We've got stationing, so we know that between lane 1 and 2, where were they? Do we want the statement every day, or do we want the statement at the end of a certain run or a certain location? So really, at a minimum, we want the statement as the work is completed. So that's a little bit of the tricky part. But I don't think it's bad to say, for the sections completed, it was in compliance with plans and specs on sheet and on sheet da-da-da, whatever it might be. But really, we need the quantity. It goes back to that measurement. We need to know how much was placed, and that for sure was missing. But you could say the statement was missing as well. Anyway, so that's just an example of some of the things that your engineers or your resident engineers might be looking for. Again, more information in the measurement and payment procedure, where it talks about square footage and it talks about materials and it talks about how we're going to record those things. I believe, again, we've got field measurements, that's all a part of it, but the calculated lengths and things like that, I'm not quite sure how that happens in e-construction right now. And so I think I just haven't had exposure to it, but we'll work with Highway O on how I'm honestly not sure where the delivery tags go. And I don't know, Alan, if you have more information on that.
Well, these slides here are just kind of an indicator of what kind of measurements and, the standard quantities that you'll see. So it's if you're not sure, you can reference this information to see what type of things you're going to be looking for to quantify.
Right. And so in the past, for instance, on this, we would have a computation book that would annotate our computation, and it says based on field measurements. And so I think what we'll have to get is examples of how that looks in e-construction now. I think the procedure manual back in the day had really good examples of how it's written in the various books and logs. And so I think that's what we'll be working. Highway CC will work with Highway O on what all this looks like. Anyway, the procedure exists, and then we'll have to see what it's going to look like in e-construction. So you've got this lump sum, right? And it talks about delivery tags and computations. So that's the part, Alan, I'm just not sure. Right now they'll have a clipboard of delivery tags that document stuff. So
they'll become attachments pretty much with a work report that's annotating these things. So yeah, we'll have to work out where they get connected, all those details. But the content will be these things.
Right.
Just the how in e-construction will follow.
Right. And so again, a lot of good content in the existing procedures, and now working on, that writing module, how it's going to look in e-construction, we'll work towards that.
Alan, were you guys going to work on getting electronic tags so it's not a paper tag?
Yeah, I mean, that might be kind of a longer term effort, it sounds like. I mean, Alex had that on his list of, objectives.
The idea of paperless is paperless, right?
Right. But that's like working with industry as well.
Yeah.
So I think it'll still be attaching the tags that we have, but maybe not the physical paper, but a photo of something like that. It'll be an electronic file when we get it into the system.
Okay.
We're working towards all of that. Our meeting on Friday, we had certain priorities, so we'll have to kind of lay out all the priorities. Work in progress, let's just say. So
we're not there yet. Yes.
Yeah. But a good point to bring up that we want to work towards e-ticketing and paperless. And there are just, again, even though some of you guys may be doing these things, everything is going to be changing with e-construction and how these things are input into that system. So just a little bit on inspection versus observation, Alan.
Right. So these are some statements that we found in various diaries, go toward this qualifying and quantifying idea and the I guess the, capturing these eyewitness type things. So that first circle about the rub rail, it's a good comment because it talks about how a discussion was held with the engineer and the foreman to come up with a correction. Right, because the initial installation was not done properly, and when the correction will be accomplished. So this is one of the good type of comments that we found that went kind of beyond just saying I don't know what it could have said less, but it's a good one. Okay, the one below that now is doing that comparison with the results that occurred versus what was needed. So it's very clear that this area is less than what was expected. So we have a statement there about quality not being quite up to par. And so then at least it's some information that an engineer can make a judgment call from. Are we going to pay less? Or is it so bad that we have to have it removed? Again, it goes toward what is it that we're going to accept on quality and payment, whether we can make payment or not. And then over on the right-hand side, the samples were taken, the slumps recorded. I would just like to know what the mix design said about what the slump should have been. So this is something where it could have had a little bit more information. And then the one on the far right is the circle with all these delays being described. This is really good information because it's showing that, we could have a problem. It's a potential. So this might be something that we want to go back and check our spec to see, okay, what are the allowable delays between placements? Are we going to have a concern with a cold joint at this point? Is there something that needs to be done? Is there going to be some reduction of some kind? So good information, and it gets us started in making this evaluation on what we can or can't pay for based on further review with the specification possibly. Now, if this person had already known what that delay allowable time would have been, it would have been good to, put that in here. But at least it's an indicator that something didn't go quite right and we need to take a look at it further. So these are considered good inspection type observation comments that we need to then kind of make decisions for against and do maybe more research.
Can I add something? I would hope that the site person is talking to hires when these things happen, so it's not just relying on someone to read this the next day kind of thing. I mean,
then
it's part of the teamwork,
that
right?
they had that discussion.
Yeah.
Like that other one on the left, upper left, where there was a discussion, so that there was that coordination.
Yeah, because even like the failed compaction that whoever did the test called the project engineer or whoever, the CMCS, and let them know that, hey, we have a failed compaction here, so that we can make other calls whether we continue or what.
So that other part, where we looked at all the different things that need to be recorded to be that eyewitness accounting, that those are some of the missing pieces. Now, they might be in other areas, but in these cases, I don't think we found them in other areas to add to that story. So yeah, definitely coordinations that occur after you do this recording is important to just write down that you did let somebody know. Can move on to the next.
So I was just typing in there. There was a question on the tags. So as discussed, hopefully we're taking pictures, maybe scanning. I know I have an app on my phone that acts like a scanner and makes it a PDF. I'm not quite sure. I think that the main point would be to make sure that it's paperless, like Art's saying. The whole driving push for this is to be paperless, and so the details of how those tags are going to be in there, we just don't know yet. We'll when we roll out the second module, really diving into e-construction and how the systems integrate, hopefully we'll have answers to some of that, but we do have a record of it. Maliko's taking notes on it, and so we'll make sure we address the questions that you're already asking. And so if you have more questions, I know Delton was talking about payment and then lump sum, and we can make sure when we do this next section that we are hitting those questions that you already have. Again, this is all a work in progress for that overall program. And as Art mentioned, I think Highway O is working on paperless ticketing. I think that's another one of the initiatives. And so how that works, not quite sure.